The Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, known as SCHD, the ETF that I personally spent tens of thousands of dollars on. Is this ETF really all it's cracked up to be, or is this ETF all hype? Stay tuned to find out. I just finished my brand new dividend investing ebook where I share exactly how I went from zero to now over 7 figures invested, and also on how I earned more than $6,000 per month in dividends. I also finished my custom dividend tracker that you can use to track your dividend income progress on an ongoing basis. So make sure to grab yourself a copy of my dividend investing ebook and the new dividend tracker today. It's the first link in my description. So in this video, we're going to look over the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF and we're going to expose on whether or not this ETF actually lives up to all the hype that it has across the dividend investing community, or maybe this ETF isn't necessarily all it's cracked up to be. So first of all, just to go over some of the basics for those of you that might not be aware, this ETF tracks as closely as possible before fees and expenses the total return of the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index. Now, to dig even deeper into this ETF, I've actually went over and dissected the Dow Jones to see exactly how it works, what it's made up of. And if you want to see that, check out some of my other videos on my channel, but take my word for it, it's pretty impressive. Now, looking into SCHD's fact sheet, just some of the highlights let's go over. It says a straightforward low-cost fund offering potential tax efficiency, which is great. The fund can serve as part of the core or complement in a diversified portfolio, makes sense. Tracks an index focused on quality and sustainability of dividends, which I said the underlying index is impressive, and it has a rigorous set of screenings for stocks to enter and exit, which is very important, especially if you're like myself and you want to sleep well at night. Now, some other main things about SCHD, it currently has 52 billion plus in total net assets, which is massive. The expense ratio is 0.06%, which is very cheap, and especially if you're like myself that now owns hundreds of shares of SCHD, you don't want an expense ratio that's too high. Now, before we go a step further, I think it's very important to get this right out of the way. Let's see exactly how much an investor would have made if they were to have invested $10,000 into SCHD, and this is back at the ETF's inception, back in 2011. If an investor invested $10K into SCHD and reinvested those dividends every single quarter, that investor would have had a total return of 343%, or just over 12.7% average annually. Now, there are certain investment vehicles that have returned even more than this on this time frame, but I think this alone garners at least the respect to keep looking a little bit deeper into this ETF, and maybe just maybe this ETF is actually worth all the hype, because I don't know about you, but an average total return of 12.79% with dividends reinvested is not bad whatsoever. But digging deeper into SCHD, these are the top 10 holdings as of right now. And make sure to subscribe to my channel because we are going to be going over the new SCHD holdings that are going to be taking place very soon here. But as of right now, we're talking things like ABGO or Broadcom, which has done very well. We have AbbVie stock, which is also one of my single holdings in my portfolio. One of my favorites, we have Merck, the Home Depot, Texas Instrument. So the top 5 stocks alone, dividend payers, dividend growers, not bad whatsoever. But then a little bit further down, some of the top holdings, we have things like Verizon. Not the biggest fan of Verizon, although I do have a sizable position in Verizon in my portfolio. Then we have Chevron, Amgen, we have Coca-Cola, and Cisco. And just for some more information, scrolling through here, you can see some of the other top holdings just because I want to make this video as informative as possible. So you can see some of the main holdings in SCHD, and a lot of these names in the group probably actually have a spot in your portfolio on their own. So overall, I wouldn't say that these top holdings are my favorite top 10 stocks across the entire markets, but they get the job done. At least they have historically. Hey, 12.7% annually isn't horrible. So now that we briefly touched on what SCHD is, how this ETF works, and some of the general top holdings, looking at this ETF's performance as far as a chart goes, max time frame, this ETF has basically tripled in price over the last, say, 13 or so years, which isn't bad whatsoever considering this ETF is by no means a growth ETF. There's definitely other ETFs out there that have returned much more than 207%, but for the sort of slow and steady investor that wants to get sort of a consistent ongoing return, at least going off of historic data, SCHD has been an amazing candidate. But one of my favorite things about SCHD, and this has to be probably the main reason on why I'm so heavily invested into this ETF, and stay tuned because I'm going to share with you my exact positioning on this ETF and how much I earn on dividends every quarter. But the main reason I love this ETF is not even the fact that it has a 3.39% trailing 12-month dividend yield, which is, for example, about double the dividend that the S&P 500 offers. And by no means am I trying to directly compare SCHD and S&P 500, but I'm just saying for those more income-focused, dividend-focused investors that want more cash flow, that want to have cash a little bit sooner, SCHD offers quite a substantial starting yield. But one of the main reasons that I own so much of SCHD, and one of the main things that drew me to this ETF long term, I'm talking about SCHD's dividend growth rate, or basically how much in dividends this ETF pays year over year consistently. Now, just to give you a quick example, back around this time 10 years ago, SCHD paid around 23 or 25 cents per share per quarter. Now around 10 years later, almost 75 cents per share per quarter. So let's just round it up, let's say about 3 times as much cash flow just over the last 10 years. Now I'm currently a 31-year-old dividend growth investor that's hopefully going to be investing for several decades from now. So my initial thought process and why I grabbed so many shares of this ETF is that if I can stack up as many shares of this ETF today or tomorrow, then 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I will be getting not only so much cash flow, but so much cash flow doubled or triple whatever it is today. And especially being a dividend growth investor like myself that doesn't necessarily have a massive amount of cash to invest into the market every single day. Consistently buying into a dividend growth ETF like SCHD that not only pays dividends quarterly, but again, consistently has paid more and more in dividends quarterly, meaning that your money is basically going to work harder and harder for you, creating a compounding effect for your overall portfolio. At least that's the idea here. So because of that reason, I personally have been building out an SCHD position in my long-term portfolio. As you can see right here on my dividend tracker, I currently have around 571 shares of SCHD across all portfolios with an average cost of around $71, $72 per share. So not even to mention the fact that I'm up substantially on the position because now SCHD costs around $6 or $7 more than where I purchased most of my shares at. But also maybe even more exciting, I have a yield on cost around 4.05% when it comes to SCHD. So I'm getting a 4% starting yield more or less, which earns on average around $138 every month. But of course, SCHD pays quarterly, so let's just say $300 or $400 I get paid every single quarter with the amount of shares that I have right now. Now, what's crazy about this is that if you extrapolate out and you look into the future and think to yourself, how much in dividends is this ETF going to pay per share next year, the year after that? These 571 shares, if I never purchased another share again, which of course I'm going to continue to purchase as many shares as I can throughout this next year and beyond, but those 571 shares, for example, if right now I'm getting an average of $138 a month, maybe 5 years from now, I could be getting paid double that or even triple that 10 years from now. And that's without even buying another single share. So all in all, is the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF all hype, or is this ETF actually worth what it offers? Now, in my opinion, I do think that the SCHD ETF really deserves a lot of the hype that it receives, although I personally do think that things like VU, VYM, DGRW, other ETFs that offer similar things that this ETF offers should also be great candidates for a long-term dividend growth portfolio. But that being said, an ETF like SCHD that has a rock-solid basket of holdings, a really good method to have new stocks enter or exit the underlying index, the fact that SCHD has such a cheap expense ratio, and the fact that this ETF, historically speaking, has paid more and more in dividends as times went on. This ETF is definitely going to be a staple, a pillar, a foundation in my portfolio for years and years to come. And although, like I said, for some investors, there might be better options, for me personally, I think this ETF is worth pretty much every single ounce of hype that it gets. But lastly, in the talks of SCHD, the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, I want to hear from you guys down below. Do you think this ETF actually is worth every ounce of hype it receives, or in your opinion, are there much better ETFs out there that offer similar things to this one? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.